August 19, 1944. Wehrmacht Headquarters, East Prussia. General Oberst Alfred Jodl studied the latest intelligence reports from the collapsing Western Front. His staff had calculated the brutal mathematics of the Allied supply lines, stretching more than 400 miles from the Normandy beaches to General Patton's spearheading Third Army. The Americans, they concluded, had outrun their logistics. Patton's advance would have to stop within days, perhaps hours. No army in history could sustain such speed without fuel. From his position at Hitler's Wolfschanz headquarters, Jodl analyzed what every German officer understood from experience. An armored division consumed over 150,000 gallons of fuel daily while advancing. The Americans were now 400 miles from their supply depots. The logic was inescapable. Patton's Third Army would grind to a halt, giving the Wehrmacht time to regroup along the Seine and perhaps hold until winter. What Jodl didn't know was that 125 miles away, 5,958 trucks were already rolling eastward in an endless convoy, headlights blazing in open defiance of military doctrine, carrying 12,500 tons of supplies every 24 hours. It was called the Red Ball Express, a logistics operation so audacious that German military science had never imagined it possible. Within 72 hours, Patton's supposedly stranded tanks would crash through German positions on the Seine. Within a week, they would liberate Paris. Within a month, they would stand at the German border. The Wehrmacht's finest military minds were about to receive a lesson in logistics that would redefine modern warfare. Delivered by 23,000 truck drivers, nearly 75% of them African-American soldiers, who turned a one-way highway system into the most efficient military supply line in history. The German General Staff's confidence in American logistical failure stemmed from decades of hard-earned experience. The Wehrmacht had invented blitzkrieg, revolutionized combined arms warfare, and understood intimately the tyranny of supply lines. Their own campaigns had repeatedly faltered not because of tactical defeat, but because logistics couldn't keep pace with success. In Russia, the Wehrmacht's advance had faltered not from Soviet resistance at first, but from the simple inability to supply forces across vast distances. German trucks broke down on primitive roads. Horse-drawn wagons, still 80% of all German transport, could not match the speed of panzer spearheads. Railway gauge differences left supplies piled hundreds of miles from the front. General der Panzertruppe Heinrich von Luttwitz, who would later command the 47th Panzer Corps, wrote in July 1944, "The Americans faced the same logistical impossibility we faced in Russia. Their mechanical advantage will become their weakness. Machines need fuel, ammunition, and parts. They have advanced 400 miles in 30 days. History teaches us what comes next: paralysis." German intelligence meticulously tracked American consumption rates. A single Sherman tank burned half a mile per gallon on roads, even worse off-road. An infantry division required 700 tons of supplies daily, an armored division 1,000 tons. Patton commanded 12 divisions advancing across a 60-mile front. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. 12,000 tons of supplies each day, transported over 400 miles of damaged roads through a network the Germans themselves had destroyed during their retreat. General Major Siegfried Westphal, soon to be Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, calculated on August 20th, "Even if the Americans possessed unlimited trucks, which they do not, and perfect roads, which they do not, and no mechanical failures, which is impossible, they could not sustain Patton's advance for more than 48 hours. Physical laws cannot be defied, not even by American industry." August 25, 1944, 2 p.m. In a requisitioned French chateau near Le Mans, Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence C. Ayres of the Motor Transport Service faced a room full of skeptical officers. The math was devastating. Patton's Third Army was consuming supplies faster than any army in history, moving at speeds that defied every logistical model. Traditional methods, rail transport, scheduled convoys, depot-to-depot distribution had collapsed under the strain. Gentlemen, we're going to create a one-way highway from Cherbourg and the beaches straight to the front lines. Every vehicle will run 20 hours out of 24. No stops except for fuel and emergencies. We'll move 12,500 tons daily, minimum. The term red ball came from railway slang. A red ball freight was an express shipment that took absolute priority over everything else. The Red Ball Express would follow the same rule. No delays, no exceptions. The technical plan defied every convention of German military doctrine. 2 parallel one-way highways, one for loading trucks moving forward, the other for empty ones returning. 24-hour operation, headlights blazing through the night, abandoning blackout discipline. Convoys would move at 5-minute intervals, maintaining an average speed of 35 miles per hour. Mobile maintenance units would be stationed every 50 miles. Military police checkpoints would remove any vehicle dropping below 25 miles per hour. Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, commander of the Advanced Section, Communication Zone, reviewed the projections. We need 140 truck companies, 5,958 vehicles minimum, operating at 90% readiness. That's impossible by any logistics manual ever written.
Yet within 36 hours, the impossible was operational. August 26, 1944. Drivers from the 3916th Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMC CCKW 2.5-ton trucks, nicknamed the Deuce and a Half, loaded with 105mm artillery shells, bound for Patton's guns near Melun, 300 miles east. The demographics of the Red Ball Express would have stunned German racial theorists. Of the 23,000 drivers who eventually ran the route, about 3/4 were African-American soldiers, serving in a still segregated U.S. Army. These men, who couldn't eat in white restaurants or use white facilities back home, were now keeping one of America's most celebrated white generals, George S. Patton, in motion. Within hours, the drivers created their own unique culture. They painted slogans on their trucks: Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, Here We Come, Detroit to Berlin Express. They wrote their own road rules. Slower vehicles pulled aside immediately. Mechanical failures were shoved into ditches. Any truck under 20 miles per hour was declared a roadblock. By August 28th, German reconnaissance began reporting something unprecedented. Units from Aufklärungs Abteilung 116 radioed in from positions overlooking the main Red Ball route. Continuous vehicle columns, headlights visible for 20 kilometers, no spacing, no blackout discipline, estimate 1,000 vehicles per hour. The Americans have abandoned all military precaution. This violated everything German doctrine taught. Headlights at night invited air attack. Continuous convoys were perfect artillery targets. One disabled truck could block an entire column. Yet the Americans seemed utterly unconcerned. Generalleutnant Edgar Feuchtinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, personally observed the Red Ball Express on August 30th. His report to Army Group B headquarters reflected growing alarm. The enemy operates a supply system beyond our comprehension. Vehicles pass at 30-second intervals, day and night, without pause. They do not hide. They do not disperse. They follow any rule we understand. This is not military science. It is mass production applied to warfare. What the Germans failed to grasp was that American logistics operated on entirely different principles. Where German doctrine emphasized concealment, Americans relied on volume. Where Germans conserved vehicles, Americans accepted 20% mechanical loss and planned around it. Where Germans followed strict procedure, Americans improvised relentlessly. The results defied every calculation. In its first week, from August 25th to 31st, 1944, the Red Ball Express delivered 89,939 tons of supplies, averaging 12,848 tons per day, over a round-trip distance of 686 miles. Its 5,958 trucks made 1.5 trips daily, consuming nearly 300,000 gallons of fuel just to keep Patton's army advancing. German logistics specialists initially captured these figures from American documents and dismissed them as exaggerated propaganda. But the numbers were real and rapidly increasing. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express had established a rhythm that seemed impossible to German logistics officers, who still relied on horse-drawn wagons for 80% of their transport. Convoys departed every 5 minutes from the western terminus, each consisting of an average of 67 vehicles. Standard load per truck was 5 tons, though 7-ton overloads were frequent. Covering 350 miles one way took an average of 14 hours, with only 2 hours of turnaround time at each end. At any given moment, 5,000 vehicles were in constant motion. The Red Ball Express became a living laboratory of innovation as drivers and mechanics solved problems that German military science deemed insurmountable. When trucks broke down, approximately 1,800 daily, mobile maintenance units performed roadside repairs. Mechanics developed a triage system, 15 minutes to fix or move the vehicle off the road. Parts were cannibalized from trucks considered beyond repair, and engines were swapped within 45 minutes using mobile cranes. When the designated Red Ball route became congested, drivers improvised alternate paths, commandeered French buses to transport personnel, and repurposed German vehicles, painting them olive drab and putting them into service. They even built bypasses around destroyed bridges, using rubble from bombed buildings as makeshift roadbeds. The Germans, observing this chaos that somehow produced order, couldn't comprehend it. Their logistics doctrine emphasized precise planning, maintenance schedules, and proper procedure. The Americans violated every principle, yet their system accelerated instead of collapsing. The most shocking revelation for German observers was American fuel management. The Red Ball Express consumed 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily just for its own operations, more than many German armies received for all purposes. Yet fuel never ran short. The Americans had created a parallel marvel, Operation Pluto, pipelines laid under the English Channel. By September 1944, fuel flowed through underwater pipes undetected by German intelligence. Forward fuel dumps were established every 25 miles along the Red Ball route. Tanker trucks ran a parallel convoy system, ensuring no vehicle waited more than 10 minutes for refueling. General Major Walter Warlimont noted from aerial reconnaissance photographs, "The Americans have fuel dumps larger than our entire strategic reserves. They burn more gasoline moving gasoline than we allocate to entire panzer divisions. This is not war as we understand it. It's industrial overflow." The Red Ball Express didn't just sustain Patton's advance, it multiplied it. German military doctrine calculated that an armored division could advance 20 to 30 miles per day under ideal conditions. Patton's divisions, supplied by the Red Ball Express, averaged 40 to 60 miles daily for weeks. On September 1st, 1944, the 4th Armored Division advanced 35 miles in the morning, halted for resupply at noon where Red Ball trucks were already waiting, and then advanced another 32 miles by evening. This 67-mile single-day advance shattered German defensive planning, which assumed a maximum of 30 miles per day. General Oberst Heinz Guderian, reviewing the reports in East Prussia, initially refused to believe them. No armored force can advance 60 miles daily for a week. Mechanical failures alone would prevent it. This must be propaganda or misidentification. but intercepted American radio traffic confirmed the reports. More disturbing to German commanders, the Americans were broadcasting their positions openly, without encryption, confident they could move faster than the Germans could respond.
By September 5, 1944, German intelligence had compiled comprehensive reports on the Red Ball Express. The implications were catastrophic for Wehrmacht planning. Every assumption about American military capability required revision. The reports described behaviors that defied German military science. Americans abandoned damaged vehicles instead of repairing them. Drivers stayed awake for days on stimulants. There was no camouflage discipline, making the entire system theoretically vulnerable to air attack, an attack that never came. Mechanical failure rates of 30% daily were overwhelmed by sheer redundancy. Fuel consumption that would bankrupt any European army seemed to pose no problem for the Americans. Field Marshal Walter Model's reaction revealed growing desperation. If these reports are accurate, we face not a superior army, but a superior civilization. They make no effort to hide because they do not fear us. They waste resources because they have infinite resources. We cannot defeat this with military tactics. The Red Ball Express drivers paid a physical price, invisible to German observers. Many drove for 72 consecutive hours, hallucinating from exhaustion and benzodrine. Accidents killed over 300 drivers during the operation. Trucks collided in fog, overturned on damaged roads, and caught fire when overheated engines ignited. Yet morale remained remarkably high. Most of these men were African Americans, denied equal rights at home, yet fully aware that they were making history. They were disproving Hitler's racial theories with every mile driven, every ton delivered. Captured German officers gave eloquent testimony to the impact of the Red Ball Express. Obersts Hans von Luck, captured in September 1944, told interrogators, "We knew we'd lost when we understood your supply system. You violate every rule, waste fuel, abandon vehicles, exhaust drivers, yet succeed through sheer volume. You have industrialized warfare beyond our comprehension." The psychological impact on German troops was devastating. Wehrmacht soldiers could hear the endless rumble of American trucks all night long. Infinite motors, infinite supplies. They had 3 rounds per rifle, while the Americans brought millions. The sound itself became psychological warfare. Even the trucks amazed German engineers. The GMC CCKW 2.5-ton truck, the backbone of the Red Ball Express, represented the perfection of mass production. General Motors had built over 500,000 of these by the war's end, more than the entire German military possessed of all vehicle types combined. These trucks featured innovations the Germans lacked: all-wheel drive as standard, automatic tire inflation systems, waterproofing that allowed fording up to 30 inches deep, engines capable of running on low-grade fuel, and heaters that actually worked in winter. Equally astonishing was American maintenance philosophy. Where Germans rebuilt engines, Americans replaced them. Where Germans rationed parts, Americans discarded entire vehicles for minor faults. Where Germans relied on a few master mechanics, the Americans had thousands of trained mechanics capable of handling 80% of repairs. As the front advanced east, the Red Ball Express adapted with stunning speed. When the original route to Chartres became inadequate, the Americans created Red Ball Express extensions overnight. White Ball Express, Rouen to Paris, Green Diamond, Cherbourg to rail transfer points, Red Lion, Bayeux to Brussels, and ABC Line, Antwerp, Brussels, Charleroi. Each new route was operational within 48 hours of conception, while German staff officers required weeks to plan similar operations. The Americans simply painted new markers, assigned trucks, and started rolling.
The prominence of African American drivers caused cognitive dissonance for Nazi racial theorists. Their ideology labeled blacks as inferior and incapable of technical competence. Yet here were black soldiers executing one of the most complex logistics operations in history. They understood the irony. They knew exactly what the Nazis thought of them, and that knowledge drove them harder. Every mile proved Hitler wrong. They were fighting racism with truck keys, defeating Nazi ideology through skill, courage, and relentless performance. Some German prisoners, forced to load Red Ball trucks as laborers, saw their worldview collapse. They worked under African American sergeants who calculated weight distributions faster than German engineers, who spoke better English than their own teachers, and who treated them fairly despite everything Nazi propaganda had said about inferior races. The Red Ball Express required infrastructure that the Germans believed impossible under combat conditions. Engineers built or reinforced 40 bridges, created 15 major fuel depots, established 26 maintenance stations, and constructed 8 temporary cities for drivers, all while the operation was ongoing. The bridge at Monte had been destroyed by German engineers to halt logistics. Wehrmacht planners calculated it would take 6 weeks to replace. American engineers built the temporary bridge in 14 hours, while Red Ball convoys detoured only 8 miles over hastily bulldozed bypass roads. German engineers observed American construction methods with astonishment. No planning meetings, no detailed blueprints, just immediate action. They built faster than the Germans could destroy, creating infrastructure that appeared overnight in the French countryside. One achievement of the Red Ball Express particularly stunned German artillery officers: ammunition supply rates that exceeded their highest theoretical calculations.
American artillery units fired without restriction, a luxury no German battery had enjoyed since 1942. During the reduction of Metz's fortifications in September 1944, the 12th Corps artillery fired over 100,000 rounds in 24 hours. The Red Ball Express delivered every round, plus a 20% surplus. By contrast, German artillery defending Metz was rationed to just 50 rounds per gun per day. The disparity was staggering. American guns fired continuously for hours, while German officers calculated that such bombardments would require 50 truckloads of ammunition per hour. The Red Ball delivered that effortlessly. The operation consumed vehicles at a rate that would have crippled any other army. By late September, mechanical attrition had reached staggering proportions. The average vehicle lifespan was 10,000 miles instead of the expected 30,000. Daily, 30% of all vehicles were out of service. 500 engines were replaced weekly, and 10,000 tires were consumed in the same period. More than 5,000 trucks were destroyed or abandoned, yet the operation never slowed. American production anticipated such losses. Ships arrived weekly at French ports carrying hundreds of new trucks. Replacement drivers were trained in 2 days and immediately assigned to convoys. German analysts calculated that the Americans were destroying more trucks each week than the Wehrmacht possessed in all of France, yet their transport capacity continued to grow. They had achieved something the Germans believed impossible: logistics faster than consumption. French civilians along the Red Ball route witnessed American abundance that contradicted years of German-imposed scarcity. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. The Red Ball Express drivers, particularly African Americans, often shared their rations with local civilians despite strict regulations. At every stop, children gathered and drivers handed out chocolate, cigarettes, and soap. The contrast with German occupation was stark. Americans casually gave away what the Germans had rationed ruthlessly. German intelligence reported the propaganda effect. French civilians now believe American victory is inevitable. They cite the truck convoys as proof. Resistance activity has increased 400% along Red Ball routes. Populations that accepted our occupation now openly oppose it.
In early September 1944, the Red Ball Express faced its greatest test. Patton's Third Army had advanced so far that even the Red Ball struggled to keep up. Round distances now exceeded 700 miles. Drivers were collapsing from exhaustion, and vehicles were breaking down faster than they could be repaired. German intelligence detected the strain. General der Panzertruppe in Hasso von Manteuffel reported on September 8, 1944. American supply lines show signs of collapse. Convoy intervals have increased from 5 to 15 minutes. Vehicle speed has decreased. This is our opportunity. But once again, American adaptability defied expectations. Within 72 hours, the Red Ball Express reorganized completely, creating intermediate transfer points to have individual runs, implementing driver rotation systems, establishing forward maintenance bases, and doubling the number of assigned vehicles. By September 12th, tonnage deliveries had actually increased. The crisis that should have broken the system only made it stronger. Supplementing the Red Ball Express, the Americans introduced another logistics innovation the Germans had dismissed as fantasy: large-scale aerial supply. C-47 transport aircraft began delivering critical supplies directly to forward units, each carrying 3 tons. On September 16, 1944, Wehrmacht observers counted over 900 transport flights in a single day, delivering 2,700 tons by air. The Luftwaffe, even at its peak during Stalingrad, had managed only 300 tons daily and called that a maximum effort. The Americans used transport planes like flying trucks, unconcerned about escorts or losses. They overcame limitations with numbers. The Wehrmacht couldn't compete with such industrial arithmetic. The Red Ball Express operated under command principles that completely defied German hierarchy. Junior officers made decisions that in the Wehrmacht required generals' approval. Sergeants commanded operations larger than those German colonels oversaw. This decentralization baffled German observers. American logistics appeared chaotic, yet it worked with breathtaking efficiency. The Wehrmacht's rigid structure could not match that speed. By October 1944, advancing railheads began reducing the need for the Red Ball Express. The operation, originally intended to last 10 days, had continued for 82 days, delivering 412,000 tons over 122 million ton-miles. German commanders, now fighting on their own borders, reflected grimly on what they had witnessed. Field Marshal Walter Model wrote in his final report, "We were not defeated by American tanks or planes. We were defeated by American trucks." The transition from road to rail was another marvel. American railroad engineers reconstructed over 1,000 miles of destroyed French rail lines while the Red Ball was still running. They laid new track faster than the Germans could sabotage it, often using captured German locomotives and equipment. The final Red Ball Express statistics defied every German calculation of what logistics could achieve. 82 days of operation, 412,000 tons delivered, 222 million ton-miles, 5,958 vehicles average, 7,000 peak, 23,000 drivers employed, 70,000 gallons of fuel consumed daily, 40,000 tons of ammunition delivered to Patton, 15 million rations, and 135,000 tons of medical supplies transported. Reviewing these figures in captivity, German officers admitted they had based their estimates of American capability on European standards, multiplying their best efforts by 3 and assuming that was the American maximum. They were wrong by a factor of 10.
Beyond tonnage and distance, the Red Ball Express achieved something far deeper. It shattered the German belief in their own superiority. Wehrmacht officers who had dismissed Americans as soft and machine-dependent now watched those same men perform logistics miracles powered by determination and abundance. German prisoners stood silently at camp fences, counting Red Ball trucks as they passed. Some wept. They understood what it meant. Not only that America could supply its armies, but that it could waste more than Germany could produce. They watched their worldview collapse, one truck at a time.
The Red Ball Express also forced an internal reckoning within the U.S. Army itself. Its success depended overwhelmingly on African American soldiers, still segregated, denied equal rights, and barred from combat roles. When General Eisenhower visited Red Ball operations in September 1944, he saw the contradiction firsthand. His aide, Captain Harry Butcher, recorded, "The general stood watching colored drivers who'd been at it for 20 hours straight. He said, 'These men are winning the war as surely as any infantry. We need to reconsider many things.'" The success of the Red Ball Express created pressure for integration that contributed directly to the desegregation of the U.S. military 3 years later. African American soldiers had proven in France what they already knew. Given the tools and opportunity, they could match anyone. The Red Ball was their battlefield, and they won it decisively. Nazi racial theorists struggled to explain the contradiction. SS racial science publications quietly stopped mentioning American logistics altogether. The evidence was too overwhelming, too humiliating to acknowledge. German military engineers, however, studied Red Ball Express operations intensely after the war, and its lessons revolutionized global logistics thinking. Volume overcomes inefficiency. Mechanical redundancy eliminates vulnerability. Decentralized execution enables speed. Standardization multiplies capability. Human endurance extends further than doctrine assumes. General Franz Haldier, former chief of the German General Staff, wrote in 1950, "The Red Ball Express proved logistics determines strategy, not the reverse. The Americans understood this. We learned it too late." Among the 23,000 Red Ball drivers, countless acts of heroism occurred that defied German comprehension. Verified records tell their stories. Corporal John L. Houston drove continuously for 48 hours to deliver ammunition to the 2nd Armored Division near Cambrai, falling asleep at the wheel 3 times, revived by fellow drivers, yet continuing until his mission was complete. Private Booker T. Washington's truck caught fire from overheated brakes while carrying medical supplies. Instead of abandoning it, he drove the burning vehicle 2 miles to a field hospital, leaping out just as the flames reached the cab. His delivery saved the lives of wounded soldiers from both sides. These stories, repeated thousands of times, revealed the true character of American military culture: individual initiative, intelligent risk-taking, and mission accomplishment over rigid compliance. Desperate to imitate success, the Germans attempted their own version late in 1944. Operation Greif, during the Battle of the Bulge, included plans to use captured American trucks for supply lines. The effort failed immediately. German drivers couldn't match American speeds, mechanics couldn't maintain U.S. vehicles, and fuel shortages crippled operations. Oberst Otto Skorzeny, commanding the mission, reported bitterly, "We captured 50 American trucks. Within a week, 30 were deadlined. Americans would have replaced them. We tried to repair them. That difference explains our defeat." The winter of 1944-45 provided the Red Ball Express with its ultimate trial. Freezing rain, snow, and ice should have halted all wheeled transport. German doctrine stated that road logistics became impossible below -10 degrees Celsius. Yet the Red Ball Express continued. Drivers wrapped chains on tires, poured alcohol into radiators, and kept rolling. Speeds dropped from 35 to 15 miles per hour, but the tonnage kept flowing. German observers reported convoys moving through blizzards that had stopped panzer divisions cold. By May 1945, captured German logistics officers were required to study Red Ball Express records. Their conclusions were unanimous and devastating to German pride. General der Infanterie Friedrich Schultz summarized, "The Red Ball Express represents warfare we never imagined. The Americans created a temporary civilization, thousands of men, thousands of vehicles, millions of tons of supplies that existed only to feed armies, then vanished when no longer needed. We built permanent infrastructure over the years. They built superior temporary systems in days."
The most profound reflection came from General Heinz Guderian, father of Blitzkrieg. We invented Blitzkrieg, but never solved its limitation, logistics. The Americans solved it through industrial abundance we thought impossible. The Red Ball Express was not a supply line, but a river of material that drowned our armies. The operation cost the United States roughly $100 million in 1944 for vehicles lost, fuel consumed, and roads damaged. To German officers trained to manage scarcity, the figure was incomprehensible. To the Americans, it was a bargain. The Red Ball Express helped capture 400,000 German soldiers, liberate France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and shorten the war by 6 months. Each day of war cost America $250 million. The Red Ball paid for itself in a single day. Lieutenant General John C. H. Lee, commander of logistics for the European theater, put it simply: "We wore out 5,000 trucks and 23,000 men to destroy the German army in France. In any previous war, that would have been catastrophic. In American industrial war, it was acceptable overhead." The Red Ball Express also transformed post-war America. Thousands of its drivers returned home with unmatched experience operating the world's largest transportation network. Many founded trucking companies, helped design interstate highways, and built the modern American logistics industry. Companies like Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways were created by Red Ball veterans who applied military principles to civilian commerce. They had learned in France that volume beats efficiency, speed beats perfection, and if you can keep trucks rolling 24 hours a day, you can move the world. Military historians now universally recognize the Red Ball Express as the decisive logistics operation of the European theater. Without it, Patton's advance would have stalled, Paris would have fallen weeks later, and German forces might have held their winter lines. The Red Ball Express proved that, in modern warfare, logistics is strategy. While German officers studied Clausewitz and battlefield maneuver, the Americans studied Detroit assembly lines and railway timetables. On September 15, 1944, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the German commander in the West, received comprehensive intelligence on the Red Ball Express. After studying it for hours, he told his staff, "Gentlemen, we face something beyond military solution. The Americans have created a supply system that makes distance irrelevant. Our entire strategy depends on their exhaustion point, but that point does not exist. They have revolutionized warfare. We are fighting the last war." When his operations officer, Oberst Hans Speidel, suggested attacking the Red Ball routes by air, Rundstedt replied, "With what shall we attack? They have 6,000 trucks. If we destroy 1,000, which we cannot, they'll replace them in a week. We would need 200 aircraft to destroy 200 trucks a day just to keep up. We don't even have 200 planes." Behind the statistics were human stories that revealed something deeper about American character. Drivers who hadn't slept in 3 days refused relief because their trucks might not make it through. Mechanics worked in freezing rain to keep convoys moving. Teenagers lied about their age to enlist as drivers. Such stories spread through both armies, creating a mythology that demoralized the Germans. The Americans, whom Nazi propaganda had mocked as soft, drove themselves harder than Germans drove horses, but they did it voluntarily, not from fear. That made them far more dangerous than German doctrine had ever imagined. The Red Ball Express became unintentional propaganda, more powerful than any leaflet or broadcast. German soldiers could hear the endless rumble of convoys through the night, the ceaseless hum of engines that never stopped. The sound itself became psychological warfare. Some German units even reported hearing phantom convoys, ghost trucks, that existed only in their minds. Evidence of how deeply the Red Ball Express had invaded their morale. American psychological warfare units soon exploited the effect, broadcasting recorded truck noises toward German lines even when no convoys were present. German soldiers reported them as real.
proof of the Red Ball Express's lasting psychological power. In November 1944, with rail networks restored, the Red Ball Express was officially discontinued. But its methods had already changed warfare forever. It proved that
the final statistics stood as evidence of industrial warfare on a new scale. Over 400,000 tons of cargo moved more than 120 million ton-miles. 6,000 trucks operating daily and 23,000 drivers keeping the system alive. These numbers mark the point where logistics became strategy, when production outweighed battlefield maneuver. 50 years later, the United States honored the operation with a commemorative stamp. Veterans recalled the hardships they had endured, exhaustion, mechanical failures, freezing weather, but also the pride of having made victory possible. Many were African American soldiers who, despite segregation and discrimination, proved indispensable. Their success forced change within the U.S. military and stood as lasting proof that determination and opportunity could overcome any barrier. The Red Ball Express demonstrated that industrial democracy could mobilize resources faster than totalitarian efficiency. German officers who once mocked American wastefulness were defeated by its abundance. The trucks of the Red Ball Express delivered more than supplies. They delivered victory. In his memoirs, General George S. Patton wrote that the truck drivers of the Red Ball Express deserved as much credit for Germany's defeat as any combat unit. They had kept his army moving when nothing else could. History now records the operation as a turning point in modern warfare. It showed that victory belongs not only to brave soldiers or clever strategists, but to those who can sustain their armies. The Red Ball Express transformed logistics into the decisive weapon of the European campaign. Its legacy endures on the highways of France and in the lessons learned by modern armies. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. The roar of those thousands of engines remains a lasting echo of how industrial power and human perseverance together can shape history.